How is it that there's people living in the year 2025 who don't understand how the earth is spinning right now? Well, the answer to that question is, it's not that they don't understand, it's that they do understand and they don't agree with the information that supports this idea. What is it that makes people from all walks of life in some of the most professional careers, such as pilots, high-ranking military officials, doctors, lawyers, teachers, reject the idea that the earth is actually spinning right now? Now, if you honestly care to know the truth so that we can address this matter with all sincerity, then watch this video to the end, because I will be pointing out all of the main reasons why many people reject the idea that the earth is spinning right now in the year 2025. So to understand why there are so many that reject this idea, we're going to be reviewing a video that was uploaded about 2 weeks ago from Physics Explained. And it was entitled, "The Earth Spins at 1,000 miles per hour, so why don't you fly off?" The video picked up quite a bit momentum, which is why I decided to even things out a bit and show you the other side of the spectrum. Because often what happens is, just like in the case of Physics Explained, people will start to reteach physics to those that reject this idea as if they don't know physics. There are people in very high positions in society that reject this idea. You trust your life in the hands of a pilot, and there are many pilots who reject this idea. And it's not that the pilot failed physics class or science. People who reject this idea totally understand the physics behind it. They don't need an explanation of it all over again. A lot of them have doctorate degrees. They've been through high levels of education. That ought to make you scratch your head and say, then why do they still reject it? And that's exactly what we'll be exploring here today. Because oftentimes the response to those who reject this idea is just to regurgitate and repeat the science and the physics that we all know. And again, those that reject this idea, it's not that they don't know the physics and science. Whose claim is really based upon more of the scientific method versus belief, speculation, or even consensus. So today we'll be trying to figure out who is more in alignment with the scientific methodology. And also today we'll be asking the question, which group is more in alignment with Occam's razor, which is often the path that leads to the truth. It's the least complicated answer. So keep that in mind, that the truth isn't complex. We're going to be dealing with Occam's razor. Occam's razor and the scientific method go hand in hand like a perfect marriage. That's what I love about the scientific method. It's so simple. It takes the complexities away from it. Anyone can perform this methodology to find out any truth that they desire. But it's the idea that the earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour based upon truth. Again, what Physics Explained is going to do in the video is just regurgitate everything we already know. And what I'll do is show you why there's so many people that reject this idea as Physics Explained go into it. And then you can decide for yourself which group is more in alignment with the scientific methodology and Occam's razor. So at this time, we're going to get into the video, and I'll be playing it at 1.25 speed.
Right now, you're spinning on a 12,000 kilometer wide rock at over 1,600 kilometers per hour, while the entire planet hurtles through space at more than 100,000 kilometers per hour. And yet, you feel nothing. So why? And no, the answer isn't that we live on a flat Earth or on the back of a cosmic tortoise. But it is one of those questions that seems almost naive to ask until you realize how difficult it is to answer convincingly.
Scientists shouldn't be trying to convince anyone anything. Either you can prove it or you can't. That's right. And there's a methodology that we use to prove things. It's called a scientific method. Not only should you not be trying to convince someone anything in science, but why is it difficult for you to give a convincing answer? Often it's always difficult for a liar to give a convincing answer. So today we're going to see who's more in alignment with the scientific methodology, which leads to the truth, versus those who has a bunch of theories and speculations that they're trying to convince you of something.
Because we are moving constantly. Yet, unless you've taken a rather large dose of magic mushrooms, you feel nothing. But why? Well, our ancestors didn't believe the Earth was moving either.
Notice that he said the ancestors didn't believe the Earth was moving because there was nothing there to force this belief on them or to indoctrinate them with this belief. But I'm glad that those who subscribe to this belief know that it is just that, a belief. And anyone that don't subscribe to it tend to get scrutinized and anathematized just like the church does non-believers. But science shouldn't be based upon belief. It should be based upon methodology. And we'll be dealing with both arguments today and showing you how each side support their claim. So today is basically the battle between the ancients versus modern physicists. But if neither side can feel the earth spinning, then the burden of proof is on the people that says it is spinning. And within that burden of proving that the earth is spinning, it's the burden of you proving to me why I don't feel it spinning, which is what the title is all about today, which is what the thumbnail is all about today. Because one side is saying, well, we don't feel the earth spinning because it isn't. Now that's Occam's razor. The simplest answer is often the one that leads to truth. But if this simple answer is indeed the truth, then I should be able to prove something if it's true, right? And that's what I'll be doing today. But I want Physics Explained to actually present some of his arguments first so I can then rebuttal them. Keeping in mind that Physics Explained already admitted that it's gonna be hard for him to give a convincing answer.
But it is one of those questions that seems almost naive to ask until you realize how difficult it is to answer convincingly.
So he already admitted that. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not gonna try to give a convincing answer today. I'm just gonna give a bunch of facts and evidence that support the idea that the earth just isn't moving, and that's why we don't feel it moving. Simple.
To them, the Earth felt solid, stable, central. And every day, they saw the sun rise in the east, sweep across the sky, and set in the west. The conclusion seemed obvious. The sun moves, and the Earth stays still.
So if I don't feel the earth moving, how can I say it is moving? If I do that, then I would have a big burden of proof on my back. And it would be very hard for me to give a convincing answer when I make such a claim. And that's why the physicists who try to explain the Earth's rotation will often admit, just like this guy, it's hard to give a convincing answer. When we're dealing with the scientific method, we can't neglect our senses, because rule number one in the scientific method is observation. If you can't observe something, how can you test it? It's like me trying to explain spirits with math equations and theories. Now, you can observe something by more than just seeing it. You can feel something. We base our reality based on what we observe. There's a reason that we were given senses. So we observe that the sky is in motion. We don't observe that the ground beneath our feet is moving or in motion. We don't observe that by way of feel. So the ancients were simply making claims based upon what they observe. And that's called being truthful. You can't make a claim based upon nothing that you don't directly experience. And we experience things through our senses. So they didn't feel themselves moving. And they observed the sky in motion. And they created a reality based upon using their senses. Now, the question is, can we prove that our senses are telling us the truth about our reality? Because sometimes our senses can lie to us. In this case, physicists are saying our senses are totally lying to us about the nature of our reality. and that they can prove this. Can they? Let's see.
Well, our ancestors didn't believe the Earth was moving either. To them, the Earth felt solid, stable, central. And every day, they saw the sun rise in the east, sweep across the sky, and set in the west. The conclusion seemed obvious. The sun moves, and the Earth stays still. Case closed. But here's the thing. That conclusion wasn't stupid. It was intuitive. It looked that way. Now, there's a story I've always loved, often attributed to the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, though probably apocryphal in nature. Apparently he was walking through the corridors of Cambridge when he turned to a friend and asked, "Why did people once believe the sun goes round the Earth?" The friend replied, "Because it looks that way." To which Wittgenstein responded, "Yes, but what would it have looked like if it looked as though the Earth were rotating?" It's a brilliant little puzzle, because visually it would look exactly the same. The experience of a moving sun from a stationary Earth is indistinguishable from the experience of a stationary sun seen from a rotating Earth.
Now here's the thing. That is true, but here's what's wrong with it. His model don't have a stationary sun. Now his model used to have a stationary sun. That was a long time ago. But they do have a more complex vortex model that they use. We'll be discussing that. Back in the day, during this debate, it was taught that the sun was stationary with the Earth going around it. But they evolved from that later to where the sun is actually hurling through space. And again, we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is very deceptive, what physics explained is doing here, because he's correct. On a model with a stationary sun, with the Earth moving, it'll look the same as a model with a stationary Earth and the sun moving. That's true, but that's not his model. And you will see throughout this video that the inconsistency in models is more inconsistent than shapeshifters. So we already exposed one deceptive little trick. And when you say, why did people once believe the sun goes around the Earth? And the answer is, well, because it looks that way. That's true for both sides. Even for the people that think the Earth go around the sun, they admit it will look the same way. What sets the two apart is that the people that's saying the sun goes around a stationary Earth, what they got working in their favor is the fact that none of us don't feel the Earth moving. And so that gives this burden of proof on those that say the Earth is moving to explain to everyone why we don't feel it. And not only do they have that huge burden, they also have this huge problem, which is that the way we observe the sun will make sense on a model that have a stationary Earth with the sun in motion, and it'll make sense on a model that have a stationary sun with the Earth in motion. The huge conundrum for the globe believers is that their current model don't have a stationary sun. So they can't make the motion of the sun work on their current model. They can only make this work on their old model, and this old model with the stationary sun is the model of Galileo, Kepler, and early heliocentrists. And you will notice that a lot of physicists will refer to ancient philosophers for their sources when those guys didn't even have the same model that they're trying to prove today. And this is another big reason why this is rejected, because most of what's taught in the globe model is just passed down theories that come from Galileo's time and outdated information that has just been really getting by on the fact that no one is questioning it, and consensus, the majority rules. And that's why flat Earth is such a big threat, because it shed light on all of these problems and inconsistencies with the model.
It's a brilliant little puzzle, because visually it would look exactly the same. The experience of a moving sun from a stationary Earth is indistinguishable from the experience of a stationary sun seen from a rotating Earth. Both would cause the sun to rise and set in the same way. So if it looks the same either way, why did we get it wrong for so long?
The question is, did we get it wrong? Not why did we get it wrong? Because that's opening up the debate, already saying that the ancient people were wrong without proving them wrong. And this is the thing about this debate. There's never been proof that we've been moving. Everyone just agreed that the ancients were wrong. No one really proved them wrong. And that's what I mean by consensus over scientific methodology. Really, the question that we gotta ask here is, are we using the scientific method to debunk our senses? Or are we using theories and equations to reinforce our speculations and belief? What we should be trying to do here is use the scientific method to prove our senses wrong. Because if I don't feel like I'm moving and you can't prove to me why I am moving but don't feel it, you fail. We have to always conclude with the proof. Who is making the most absurd claims? If we're spinning at over 1,000 miles per hour right now and we don't feel it, and one group of people say, well, you don't feel it because we're not moving, that's called Occam's razor. If someone say, well, we are moving at 1,000 miles per hour and you can't feel it for these reasons, the reasons that they give, we have to examine those reasons in their entirety and not just accept them based on consensus or getting ridiculed, because that's what most of us have done. We've accepted them through indoctrination, not that we really questioned them or did the scientific methodology. So the first step of this methodology is observation. People looked up in the sky, they saw these predictable patterns, and they said that's because the earth ain't moving, but the stars are, and we can predict the motion of these stars over time. The Greeks came along later and decided, when they observed the motion of the stars, they said, what if the earth is doing all the moving and the sun is actually stationary, which is why we see the sun rise and set the way that we observe it. Right off the bat, what debunked the Greeks' ideology is the fact that the sun isn't stationary. All physicists will base this idea off of a stationary sun, just like physics explained just did. But in their current model, the sun isn't stationary. It's like they're skipping back and forth to different versions of their model to make different arguments at different times, which is deceptive. You need a consistent model. The truth is that the way we observe the sun every day, it makes sense on two different models. The earth stationary with the sun moving, or the earth moving with the sun stationary. Because they don't have a stationary sun, it disqualifies them. That is not their model. They're trying to argue a model that's not currently their model. In order for them to make sense out of the predictable patterns that we see over the ages, for example, the Giza alignment, the Kukulkan alignment with the sun, these patterns have been the same for thousands of years, and there haven't been any shifts in the positioning of these alignments, and their model requires shifts. So we have to go into some of the discrepancies with their claims. Step 3 in the scientific method, the hypothesis, a proposed explanation or educated guess that can be tested. We're gonna see how they're testing their hypothesis. So now let's go ahead and get into the real meat of this video and start getting into the arguments from both sides and see who make most sense.
When you open your front door and step outside, you don't get hit in the face by rushing air. There's no strange sensation of spinning or flying through space. And yet, when you're in motion, you often do feel something. When you run or cycle, you feel wind resistance pushing against your skin. Stick your head out of a car window and the air rushes past your face. But what you're feeling isn't motion itself, it's the force of the air hitting you, caused by your motion relative to the atmosphere.
I want y'all to understand the absurdity of what is being said and think about Occam's razor. I mean, really just think about which answer is the most absurd. He's saying that when you're driving down the highway and feel the wind hitting your face, it isn't motion itself, it's the force of the air hitting you. Duh. Now, if you need to be taught that, then you probably just slow. Here's the part where it becomes real absurd. We know we're not feeling motion itself. We know that as we move through a medium, just like a fish swimming through water, the friction of the water passing around the fish body through its gills even, will get more intense the faster that the fish swim. Just like the wind coming inside of your car window get more louder and intense the faster that you speed the car up. We're within a medium. And when you be perfectly still, you feel nothing. When you move through this medium, there's a slight bit of resistance. And depending on how fast you're moving through this medium will dictate how strong the force of the air is that is hitting you. Simply put. Now here's the part that gets quite absurd. The absurd part is when he say that this is caused by your motion relative to the atmosphere. And what he's saying here is this is determined by which way you're going. So if the earth is spinning from east to west and you're driving down a highway from west to east, he's saying the force would be relative to your position. Because in the globe model, the atmosphere and the ground are synced together and they supposed to turn together, which we're going to talk about that more later. But let's just zoom in on this first point. Basically what he's saying is that it's mostly related to your position and which direction you're traveling in relation to the Earth's atmosphere. So if you're going against the grain, so to speak, or against the current, then this force would be stronger. So he's literally counting for the Earth's rotation when it comes to you driving down a highway in your car, and you don't think that's absurd. If a person driving their car from north to south, then the force of the wind will be exactly the same as if they was driving from east to west, west to east, or south to north. These are facts. So it's not relative to Earth's atmosphere, but it should be on the globe model, and you'll see why as we move forward. And if you think what I just said was absurd based upon a person's position and which direction they're driving in relation to the Earth's atmosphere, hey man, don't get mad at me. This is the argument Physics Explained is making. And if you think I'm lying, he's about to double down on it. So the Earth rotates from west to east. And let's say that somebody is driving down the highway and they traveling in the same direction that the Earth is rotating. What he's saying is that the force of wind that they would feel if they rolled a window down on the highway would be almost none because they're going with the same direction of the Earth. Tell me that ain't absurd, y'all. The simple answer is that the Earth ain't rotating, and that in any direction that a car drive, whether it's west to east, north to south, the force of the wind will be the same. It will be dictated on how fast the car is going through this medium that we call the atmosphere. Has nothing to do with the Earth rotation. That's easily debunkable. Just get in a car, measure the force of the wind as you drive down the highway, and do that in different directions and tell me if it's the same. This is the absurd argument that he's making. And this is the argument that they have to make for this model, which is why I said we got to use Occam's razor and we got to use the scientific method. And here's another deceptive trick that Physics Explained does. To support his absurd argument, he uses a train, which is a sealed environment. And the last time I checked, I thought that we lived on the surface of the Earth, not inside of it enclosed. That would be a flat Earth argument. People got to be dumb to go for this, because why don't you feel any wind force when you're inside of a train? Duh, because you're inside of a train and you're sealed. The man just used a video of someone literally outside of the car. They're not sealed. He used the Jim Carrey video of you literally got your head in the wind. And he's saying that the reason you're feeling that wind in your face is because you're traveling from east to west and the Earth is spinning from west to east. That ain't my argument, that's his. It's clearly the argument that y'all are making. It's absurd. The question I gotta ask is, how does he know which direction Jim Carrey is driving in this movie? He's just assuming that if a person is driving in the same direction that the Earth is rotating, then they wouldn't feel a lot of wind resistance, because it'll be like you being in a river that's flowing and you're swimming with the flow of the river, with the current, you won't get tired as quick. You won't feel a lot of resistance of the water pushing against you because you just going with the current versus you swimming against it. Very simple argument, but it's absurd. And you're going to see how more absurd this get and how many more deceptive tricks that I expose. Because this is trick number 2. You make an example based upon a non-enclosed situation. And then you try to compare it to a train, which is an enclosed environment. Come on, people, you got to wanna be fool to go for this. Don't let them play with your intelligence like that just to go along with the crowd and consensus. All they can do is ridicule, mock, and call you names. I'm using facts and I'm showing you how absurd this is. I don't care which direction you traveling in, the wind resistance will be the same. So this guy is so deceptive, and he know that the people is so dumbed down that in order to make his argument, because people, you got to think about it. Do you know how hard it'll be to give an example of someone driving down the highway with their head out the window and we don't get any wind resistance? Do you know how absurd that is? Imagine being in a car with your friend that lives in New York, and y'all got your girlfriends in the whip with you for the road trip. And since y'all traveling from west to east, when your girlfriends try to take a selfie, you know, with the windows down on the road trip, they hair not even blowing in the wind. Wouldn't that be strange? According to what he's saying, when you're traveling in the same direction that the earth is spinning, you won't get no resistance. People, that's baloney. Can't nobody get in a car and travel from west to east and show me no wind resistance unless they got the windows rolled up on their car or they're in some sort of enclosed environment where the wind simply just can't get in. And that's exactly what he's about to do to make his point. See, because he used this right here to prove that the earth is rotating. The man is saying that Jim Carrey hair is blowing in the wind because he's driving in the opposite direction that the earth is rotating. The absurdity of this is that you got to prove that if a person driving down the highway with their windows down and they head out the window, that they will feel no wind resistance if they traveling from west to east. You got to prove that. But what do? You go and get a train, which is an enclosed environment, can't no wind get in. But people are so dumb, I can't believe they fell for this trick.
But what you're feeling isn't motion itself, it's the force of the air hitting you, caused by your motion relative to the atmosphere. If the air moves with you, like inside a sealed train gliding along at high speed, you feel nothing at all. No wind, no push, no resistance. You could be travelling at 200 miles an hour, and if everything around you is moving with you, you won't feel any difference than if you were standing still.
You know why? Because you're in a sealed, enclosed train, no different than an airplane. People, are we really this slow? We in trouble, man. Really? So you telling me if a person stick their head out the window of this train, they won't feel any wind resistance? Because the argument that he's making isn't that, well, they're not feeling any wind resistance simply because they're in a train. That's the argument I'm making. The argument he's making is that they're not feeling any wind resistance is because the train is going in the same direction that the earth is rotating, as if he know which direction his train is going. And you know what's so crazy about that? Trains travel in all directions on earth and no one feel wind resistance. You know why? Because they all inside and enclosed. No one in a train traveling in any direction feel wind resistance simply because they're enclosed. And you know this would have to work in reverse too. Meaning if I'm traveling with the current, with the rotation of the earth is no resistance. So if I'm traveling against it, then there's a lot of resistance. That's the argument he's making. You got to make both of those together. And the thing about the latter argument is that if I'm traveling in the opposite direction that the earth is rotating, that's 1,000 miles per hour of atmosphere working against me. So you tell me what kind of engines we got that can fight back against the 1,000 miles per hour atmosphere. People, they are saying that when something leaves the ground, it's moving with the atmosphere. So if I jump right now, I landed back in the same spot because the atmosphere and the ground are synced together, moving together. They're both rotating in unison. If the atmosphere and the ground is synced together to the point where when you get off of the ground, you are also moving in the same direction as the Earth's atmosphere, then how can a plane going in the opposite direction fight against that? How would it ever get to its destination? It would just get carried with the current. Have you ever seen someone trying to swim in a strong river current? No matter how hard they try to swim, they get nowhere. This would be the fate of any plane if this was true. And think about planes traveling from south to north. These planes travel in a straight line. They don't slant to the left or the right. But if the plane was traveling in a straight line from south to north, the entire atmosphere will be pushing it to the left at 1,000 miles per hour. It'll be pushing it from east to west. And if the plane is just flying in a straight line, it'll be slanting. The entire atmosphere will be pushing it to the left. Now, according to globalists, this is why the plane don't have to slant. So all the pilot got to do is fly straight and the atmosphere will do the rest. That falls apart when the plane is actually flying from west to east to get to a destination. Now it's flying against the Earth's rotation. So the Earth is pushing it westward, it's traveling eastward, and somehow it still makes it to its destination without accounting for any 1,000 miles per hour push from the atmosphere. That's totally ignored. Which answer is more absurd? The fact that the ground just isn't moving and the atmosphere and ground isn't rotating together in synchronicity. The ground is stationary and the pilot don't have to worry about an atmosphere that's constantly pushing it to the left because the Earth is just simply not rotating. Occam's razor. So all planes that are traveling from north to south and south to north aren't traveling in straight lines above and below the equator. They're going in slants. People, we can just get a map of flight charts and see that planes fly in all directions. And none of them are considering anything about the rotation of the Earth. If a plane that's traveling with the rotation of the Earth get no resistance, then a plane traveling against it gonna get a lot of resistance. So planes are even flying in slants. They're not just flying from south to north in a straight line. They're flying in slants themselves to get to other locations on the Earth, on the globe model, right? So tell me, how is it that a pilot that's already flying in a slant, when he's traveling above the equator, he's already flying in a slant to the left to get to a certain city, and the Earth is also pushing him to the left, he would overshoot his target. And a plane that is traveling from west to east with the Earth rotation, it'll be like a man swimming with the current in a river. He will get an extra boost, an extra push. But see, pilots get these extra boosts, extra pushes, no matter what direction they fly in. And it should only be from west to east if the atmosphere is uniform. What you're saying is every cloud in the sky is moving from west to east. Everything in the sky, including the plane, including me when I jump, I'm landing back in the same spot essentially because the Earth is tossing me back into the same spot as it rotates. Right now in my garage now, I'm jumping. I land back in the same spot because the Earth just essentially tossed me forward. It's absurdities on top of absurdities.
Train gliding along at high speed, you feel nothing at all. No wind, no push, no resistance. You could be travelling at 200 miles an hour, and if everything around you is moving with you, you won't feel any difference than if you were standing still. So no, your body doesn't sense speed directly. In fact, Galileo was the first to recognise that if you and everything in your immediate surroundings are moving at a constant speed together, then there's no experiment you could perform to tell whether you're moving or at rest. This idea is now known as the principle of Galilean relativity.
Let's listen to what Galileo, the Freemason, just said, because this is very important. If everything around you is rotating in the same direction at the same speed, the ground, the sky, the clouds, everything you see, just uniform, brilliantly, perfectly in synchronicity, even though it all started from some big bang, all of a sudden you get these perfect numbers and perfect shapes like 360-degree circles from a boom. Let's deal with this dumb argument that Galileo got started, because people been repeating Freemasons for thousands of years, and we are smart today, and it's easy to debunk. Galileo was wrong. You telling me when I jump right now, everything is synced together, the earth is rotating this way, the sky rotating this way, so I'm just being tossed forward, and that's how I'm landing back in the same spot? Let's go back to our chart and see whose argument is the most absurd. Who got the most simplest argument? Now think about what Galileo just said, because what Galileo just said is very important. If you ever wanted to know, do the globalists do any experimentation to prove the Earth rotation? You just heard it.
If you and everything in your immediate surroundings are moving at a constant speed together, then there's no experiment you could perform to tell whether you're moving or at rest.
There's no experiment you can perform to tell whether you're moving or at rest. So the globalists got to explain to me what experiment that they do to prove that the Earth is moving. Now, any experiment that they name, I'm going to replay this sound bite right here, because according to Galileo, ain't no experiment you can perform to tell if the Earth is moving or at rest. Now, even though that's a bunch of malarkey, when flat earthers come with experiments that can prove that the Earth ain't moving and that it is at rest, then they try to come with experiments to prove that the Earth is moving, even though they just said ain't no experiments that they can do to prove to you whether it's rotating or at rest. And even when we leave the Earth, we can't look back at it and visually see the rotation or any motion blur from rotation. We also can't feel it. We can't see it. We can't feel it. We literally can't use any of our senses to prove that the Earth is rotating. So what are we using? Foucault's pendulum and long drawn out equations to support theories. And we'll be debunking Foucault's pendulum in a future video. We got to take everything one step at a time because it's a lot to unpack. And this is just part one. Now, before I get into these arguments, keep in mind what their counter argument is going to be. Their counter argument is going to be everything you just said, Sanchez, is true, but it don't debunk the globe because everything is moving together and it's all perfectly synced. That answer is very absurd on their model when you think about how everything started in their model from a random Big Bang explosion. Using Occam's razor, it ain't looking good for the globe side because who got the most absurd answer here? So there's no experiments that they can do to prove that the Earth is rotating, and this was just admitted. We can't use any of our senses to prove the spin of the Earth, and there's no experiments that we can do to prove if it's spinning or at rest, according to the people who said that it's spinning, not the people who said that it's at rest. So these people are basically telling you, we just can't prove it. You just gotta believe it. And that is why I zoomed in on the word belief in the beginning of this video. And I said, I'm glad that they know it's just a belief.
Our ancestors didn't believe the Earth was moving either.
Remember, when people say, but you can't prove the Earth is flat, you're saying that because you're admitting you can't prove your model. But remember who the burden of proof is on. If we don't feel the Earth moving, we can't see it moving, there's no experiments we can do to prove that it's moving. How can we say it's moving? If we say it is moving, then it becomes a big burden to prove that. And that's why I also zoomed in on the beginning of the video when he said it's hard to give an answer that's convincing.
Until you realise how difficult it is to answer convincingly.
It ain't hard for me to do it. The hard thing is for people to accept the truth that they've been lied to. Everything is moving together. It's perfectly synced. Now, how absurd is that argument? Especially when I can show you videos like this of clouds moving in opposite directions. For their model to work, everything have to be perfectly synced. Occam's razor. Which model requires the most absurd claims? Again, claims, not facts. Because there's no experiments that they can do, remember, to prove that the earth is in motion. And we can't use any of our senses to prove it. Why? Because everything is perfectly synced. So if I jump right now and land back in the same spot, it's because the atmosphere just pushed me forward. Because the sky and the ground are moving together. So every time you jump and land in the same spot, it's because basically the earth is tossing you forward. Now, which answer is more absurd? Which answer is more in alignment with Occam's razor? Do you understand how impossible this would be to get all of these perfect synchronicities and all that from just a random Big Bang explosion? Not to mention, every time I jump, the earth atmosphere is just tossing me forward, making me land in the same spot. And there's no way to test this because check this out. If I go inside of a vacuum and rid myself of the earth atmosphere and jump, I'ma land in the same spot in a vacuum too because I'm in a vacuum. I'm in an enclosed environment. So like they said, there's no way to really prove if we're rotating or not. But you know why that's a problem? The burden of proof is on the people that said we're rotating, not on the people that said we ain't, because our senses say we ain't, and there's no experiments to prove we are. So we gotta use Occam's razor. The reason I'm jumping and landing in the same spot right now is simply because the ground beneath me ain't moving. Occam's razor. And if someone say, well, you are moving, then they will have to prove that I'm moving. But what did we just go over? There is no experiments you can do to prove that the earth is moving, because the claim that they're making is that everything is synced together. The atmosphere is synced with the ground. So if you jump, when you get suspended in the air is gonna push you in the direction of the atmosphere. Now, people, we can see insects fly in all directions. We can see planes fly in all directions. We can see clouds move in all directions. And we still believe this baloney. Why? Because we grew up believing it. It's indoctrination. They try to call flat earth a cult, but a cult is literally something you was born into and something you never really had a chance to question. And something that when you do start to question it, they ridicule you, mock you, make you feel like you ain't part of the crowd. And the truth is that the space program, NASA, is just a big cult and a satanic cult, which is why they wear the symbol of the serpent. And that serpent have deceived the whole world, just like the Bible say. How did he deceive them? About the true nature of their reality, the true nature of the creation. Guess how we connect with the creator? Through the creation. The people who don't have a connection to the universe and the creator is breaking your connection to the true nature of the creator, which is perfect. What are the chances of you dropping a vase and getting perfect circles? That's the chances of the Big Bang happening and us getting the sun and the moon. And us getting perfect, predictable patterns in the sky that we've been predicting for ages. In their model, Earth and all of the planets are making these elliptical, oblate, spheroid type patterns. But when we look up in the sky at time-lapse footage of the stars, we don't see oblate patterns or elliptical orbits. We see perfect 360-degree circles. Now, what are the chances of you getting stars to make these perfect 360-degree circles around Polaris and everything just flung out from a Big Bang? All of these precise numbers and calculations and predictable patterns and perfect shapes. You gotta ask yourself, who got the most absurd answer? And in the case of the globalists, they have a long list of different answers, or should I say explanations. But keeping in mind, they gotta beat these theories and explanations into you with long drawn out equations and ridicule. They got to make it like you don't understand it, when the truth is that I totally understand it. That's how come I know it's a bunch of BS. Now, what's my proof that the earth is stationary? Let's get into it. You don't think these arguments are absurd because you grew up in them your whole life, just like anybody in any belief system. But check this out. If the ground and the atmosphere is synced together and locked together with the Earth's rotation, then just think about a B-17 pilot is traveling at around 300 miles per hour. But these B-17 bombers during war are traveling in all different directions to flank the enemy and to hit different targets, and also to maneuver around the enemy. Not only are you saying that the Earth atmosphere constantly moving them in one direction in synchronicity with the ground while they are zigzagging and doing all of these complex patterns in the sky, along with dropping bombs down and hitting their target with pinpoint precision. Despite that the earth beneath them is rotating at 1,040 miles per hour, none of that matter. They can zip here, hit a target, zip over here, zip over here, zip over here. Doesn't matter if they're going with the earth atmosphere or against it. They're going in all directions. They're dropping their bombs, hitting targets all over the place. And you mean to tell me all while doing this, the earth is dragging them along at 1,040 miles per hour? And they're traveling at 300 miles per hour, all while dropping bombs from 7 miles down in the sky. That's the length of the Las Vegas Strip. They're hitting a target that's traveling at 1,525 feet per second underneath them. That's what these B-17 pilots would have to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be piling up all of the absurdities as we go into this video to show you why there are people in 2025 that reject the idea that the earth is rotating. Another argument to show you how absurd this claim is: if the atmosphere and the ground is synced together and they both are going in the same direction, which is west to east, then this smoke plume should have a trail that's going from east to west, just like this train. This train is moving from left to right from our perspective, but the smoke plume that is leaving behind is leaving a trail from right to left. So if the earth was rotating from west to east, then these smoke plumes wouldn't be going straight up in a straight line. And we have a picture of a train on the left to show you that when smoke is ascending from a moving object, it will leave a trail. No doubt about it. We got smoke plumes that is ascending up into the atmosphere, no trails. No trails at all to show us the rotation of the earth from west to east at over 1,000 miles per hour. More absurdities. We gotta go with Occam's razor. This smoke plume don't have a trail that shows the earth rotation because the earth ain't rotating. Simple. See how simple that is? Versus me doing long drawn out equations, stacking theories on top of each other, doing deceptive tricks, using a model that shape shifts with every argument that you corner them on, subscribing to explanations that there's no experiments you can do to prove them. None of your senses supports that they exist. This is no different than a person believing in a tooth fairy. There's no experiments you can do to prove the tooth fairy exists. None of your senses can detect the reality of some tooth fairy, but yet many children believe in the tooth fairy. If you believe that you're spinning right now at more than 1,000 miles per hour and that when you jump, the earth just tossed you forward and put you in the same spot, you're absurd. Occam's razor, people. Scientific methodology. And again, you can't use the scientific method to prove that we're rotating because there's no experiments you can do. I gotta keep reminding you that. Now, why isn't there any experiments you can do? Because when it comes to experimentation, before you can experiment, you must observe. And if I can't sense with any of my senses that I'm rotating, if there's no experiments that I can do to prove I'm rotating, then my explanation isn't supported with the scientific method or with facts, observations, senses. It's supported with trickery like the Foucault's pendulum, deceptive tricks like what I just pointed out previously, ridicule, consensus, group thinking, peer pressure, theories, and long drawn out equations. So this smoke plume argument is just yet another dagger to expose more absurdities. But I'm still not done. Now, if the ground beneath my feet is rotating faster than sound and the atmosphere is moving with the earth, then you wouldn't see clouds moving. The fact that they do proves that the earth doesn't move with the atmosphere, people. Is simple. So planes and balloons should be affected by the alleged spin of the earth. A plane travels slower than 1,000 miles per hour, thus no momentum achieved. And again, clouds can be seen moving, thus the atmosphere isn't moving with the alleged rotation of the earth. You got to think about the argument that they make. They're saying the entire atmosphere, the clouds, the sun, the moon, all of that is synced with the earth's rotation, which is why we wouldn't notice it. See, in order for their model to be true, they got to sync the atmosphere with the ground. But when they do that, it is so easy to debunk. And it depends on people just not questioning it at all. Just think about this. Have you ever sat on your porch or sat in your living room and you saw like a beautiful cloud above your house? Or maybe you saw a cloud with a weird pattern, so it stood out to you. But eventually, that cloud passed you by. That cloud passed your house. And the more you would look at that cloud throughout the day, the cloud would slowly be moving away from you. I've done this before. Get in the comment section. Let me know if you know what I'm talking about. A lot of people don't observe the sky anymore, which is why they fall for this. We too busy looking down at devices. So yeah, if you just pick any cloud any day and track it, sit on your porch, come out there maybe every hour, check on it, you will see that that cloud is moving away from your house. Now, according to the globalists, the sky and the ground are moving together. Your house is on the ground, people. This is simple. No cloud should be passing your house by if my house and the atmosphere is synced together. Come on, people. You see the problem here? Just think about a hot air balloon. They're telling you that a hot air balloon can raise up in the sky and drop right back down in the same spot, because when a hot air balloon is raising up, the atmosphere is carrying the hot air balloon with the earth rotation. So when the hot air balloon drop back down, boom, it's always in the same spot because the ground beneath it is in sync with the atmosphere above it. Versus, hey, the ground ain't moving. That's why the hot air balloon dropped back in the same spot. And that's why I just dropped back in the same spot. Now, whose answer is the most absurd and requires the most ridiculous beliefs to subscribe to? The hot air balloon is dropping back in the same spot because the air and the ground is synced together. But yet a cloud just passed my house. The air and the ground sync together, but yet if you track any cloud in the sky, you will see that the ground ain't moving, but that cloud sure enough passing you by. If the ground was synced to what the sky is doing, your house and the cloud would be both moving from west to east with the earth rotation. This is the argument that they're making. So people that reject this idea, they ain't dumb. They just the minority. If you thought that there couldn't be any more absurdities, you couldn't be more wronger. Let's continue. The SR-71 Blackbird has a top speed of 2,193 miles per hour. Now remember, the ground beneath it is rotating at 1,000 miles per hour. You do the math. 2,193 take away 1,000. That's going to give you around 1,200 miles per hour, 1,100 roughly, if you want to put the 40 on there. But a SR-71 Blackbird at a top speed of 2,200 miles per hour is flying underneath a ground that's rotating at 1,000 miles per hour. Under the ball earther theory, the pilot would have to compensate a 1/4 mile of every curvature every hour. That's 23 feet a minute. You see how many absurd things you have to believe in to accept this idea? And I know most of the world accept it, so it feels right. That's literally what brainwashing, indoctrination, and a cult is all about. But I'm about facts over feelings and senses over consensus. So imagine a SR-71 Blackbird pilot zipping through the air at 2,200 miles per hour with a ground beneath him rotating at 1,000 miles per hour, hitting targets, going in all directions with the rotation against it and all that. And there's no compensation of the Earth's rotation when he's aiming at a ground target. Not to mention, we got real government documents that tell you that these aircraft are designed based upon a non-rotating stationary Earth, but people will still deny and reject these government documents. This document right here is a legitimate NASA document that anyone can pull up from their website. And it's the property of NASA/Langley Air Force Base. And we know Langley Air Force Base is the most high-tech Air Force base when it comes to high-tech aircraft. And as you read here, this report documents the derivation and definition of a linear aircraft model for a rigid aircraft of constant mass flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth. People ignore that. They'll act like these documents don't exist, but they'll entertain documents leaked from the Pentagon about aliens and UFOs and UAPs. But anything that contradicts their cult, their belief, they reject it. You telling me that this helicopter can hover in the sky for several hours and it'll land in the same exact spot because the Earth atmosphere and the ground are synced together. But yet, while the helicopter is hovering in the sky, clouds are just passing it by. This blows your argument out the water, man. If the sky and the ground are synced together and the sky is moving the helicopter along with the ground, then we shouldn't even see clouds passing us because we should be moving with the clouds. Their whole model depends on a person not thinking about it, not questioning it, not challenging it, just accepting it since birth. So I gave you a bunch of arguments that disprove the idea that we're rotating, from smoke plumes. And again, if you look at these smoke plumes right here, they're going in all directions. They should all be showing that the Earth is rotating from west to east, but they don't. So I've given you so many absurdities. We've used Occam's razor. You make your mind up. Which model has the most simplest answer? The reason the smoke plumes don't give us a trail pattern is because the Earth is stationary. The reason the pilots can whip through the air at these ridiculous speeds and drop their bombs on their target no matter which direction they're flying, it's because the Earth is stationary. The reason the sky makes these same perfect predictable patterns with this perfect math associated with it is because the Earth is stationary, but the sky is in motion, which is why Giza will continue to make its alignments, Kukulkan, and many others that we're yet to discover. All of this is based upon a stationary Earth. So ask yourself, who's making the most absurd claims for their model? Who's giving the most absurd explanations for their claim? Whose claim is mostly in alignment with Occam's razor and a scientific method? Whose claim requires the most absurd explanations? Because if you think about our claim, it's one simple, consistent answer. The Earth just not moving. And that way we don't have to explain away all of these things that I just presented. Now, I know how strong cult mentalities are. So I do expect people to get in the comment section and name call. If you like my content, please think about becoming a member of this channel. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. Peace and much love.